Thank you all again for giving me the opportunity to come up here and preach for you again today. It's such a joy and a blessing. Brother Malcom always says that he loves to be able to learn the sermons and prepare the sermons, but then whenever he doesn't actually enjoy the preaching part, and man, I'm really starting to feel that sentiment. It's so fun to get to know God's word and dig in and do different things, but the preaching part is you just got to do it. But it can't be understated how impactful and how important your prayers are for your preacher, your pastor. No matter where you are, no matter who you're sitting under, I can feel it, and I appreciate your prayers. This is really teaching me how important it is to to pray for Brother Malcom. So this is a rather unique sermon. It wasn't exactly something that I was just thinking off the top of my head would be something to be good for Sunday night preaching, but whenever Brother Malcom asked me to preach back in December, then I started praying heavy about, what exactly should I be preaching on. I had a few things that God was teaching me in my own personal life that could be turned into a message, that could be, stuff that I'm learning in my faith, in my walk and things. But there was a night that I went to sleep, woke up, or in the middle of the night I had a dream. And the dream was, it was a very unique dream, and the setting was, I was sitting around a whole bunch of people, like 30. It was like a classroom setting. It was like 30 or so people, and somehow there was a debate going on, person to person, talking about whether or not the existence of God was real. And it's a battle that our generation really has to struggle with. Our generation is constantly fought with, if you believe in God, then you're weak, and things of that sort of nature. So it was something that was just bouncing around in this dream, and I hadn't said anything yet in the dream, and then somebody said, "I am an atheist. Prove to me that the God is real. That prove to me that there is a God." And in the room went quiet. Then the mediator of the debate, I turned and kind of looked at him, and I hadn't said anything yet, and he just turns to me and just says, "Well, Dustin." And so then I was like, well, I guess I'll have to stand up and present my faith. So I did in the dream, and this outline is, I woke up from that dream at like 5 a.m, and I rushed to my computer and jotted down as much as I possibly could remember from the dream. It is, this outlines like 90% or so of exactly what I said in that dream of my rebuttal to atheism. So that's where I'm at. So I started off with my first point. My first point was creation. Our society in younger generations are taught to believe evolution from school. The public school system teaches that the earth is billions of years old, and that if you believe anything other than what the theoretical science believes, then you are considered to be non-scientific, and you're considered to be flying in the face of facts if you don't believe in the Big Bang, you don't believe in the evolution of these things. There was in the dream I presented my first point. My first subpoint on that is, you can believe in science and you can not believe that the earth is billions of years old. The reason why I say that is because there's a lot of assumptions that go into the earth being a billion years old. There's a lot of leaps of faith that they take along the way. Yes, they're using math to figure it out, and yes, they're using formulas and things to come up with their answers, but they're making assumptions along the way. And one of those, one way to illustrate that is a probe called the Voyager probe. Now, nobody probably has heard of the Voyager probe because it's just something that happens silently in the background that is a proof of God's faith, or of the Bible in Genesis, and but it's silenced by mainstream science theory. And so the Voyager probe was a probe that was in the 1980s that we sent out to Neptune and Uranus to test to see whether or not they had a magnetic field. So according to the math equations, if you plug in, the Earth being, or the universe being billions of years old, then by the time that the magnetic fields of these places should be basically essentially zero, because it should be so cold at this point in time that it should be just a frozen rock at this point, Neptune, Uranus, that is. So there shouldn't be a magnetic field at all on these two planets, on these last two planets. Those are furthest out in the solar system. And 180 scientists or so submitted their proposal of their exact calculation, what they thought it was be. It was either 0 or next to 0 for almost all of them, except for one. There's one person who stood out among all of them that he had an astronomically high magnetic field based off of his calculations. Now, he didn't use a different formula. He didn't use a different math. He didn't make a foul in his arithmetic. He just used different assumptions. He went to the Bible and he said, how old is the Bible? And so to the best of his knowledge, he'd come to is somewhere between 10 and 6,000 years old. So he plugged in 8,000 years into the same formulas that everybody else was using, and it produced a much higher magnetic field. And there's exactly one person, this guy's name was Dr. Russell Humphreys. And he came, and he was within his standard error on both Neptune and Uranus's magnetic fields. And so that to me was a huge, it was a huge proof to me that you can believe in science and you can believe in God's word, and you can believe in creation, you can believe they don't have to mutually not exist. And as time goes on, we're finding more and more fossils that are from, what looks like a flood, but, whenever we're presented fossils in school, then they're layered in, this came from this period, this came from this period, and these came from this period, but as time goes on, we're finding more and more fossils from this period that are way down here, and from this period that are way up here, and it's just all these anomalies that they keep coming up with over and over, and it's pointing more and more and more towards that the fossils were tossed and jumbled around in things, and that would happen in a flood, that would happen in plate tectonic shifts, and that would happen, and all these things. And science would also tell us that that there are, Science would also tell us that there are no dinosaurs that existed during the time of humanity, but that doesn't make sense for a couple of reasons. One is there's Indian cave drawings from that predates thousands of years old that show pictures of dinosaurs in them, and those guys aren't archaeologists. So how do you explain that? That just makes no sense whatsoever. But you can date the paint and everything else, and it's thousands of years old. And then if you even look to the Bible there, it says in Job chapter 40, verse 15, it says, behold now a behemoth, this is God talking to Job, behold now a behemoth, which I made thee, he eaten grass as an ox. Lo, now his strength is in his loins. So he's a herbivore because he eats grass like an ox. His strength is in his loins, and his face is in the navel of his belly. His mouth, he moveth his tail like a cedar. He shines stones and are wrapped together. So people were thinking that, if it's a behemoth animal that eats grass like a cow, then it would have to be a hippo or or an elephant or something like that. That would be some large animal, but that doesn't fit the descriptions lower, because he moveth his tail like a cedar tree is what it's saying. So what is a cedar tree? What does a hippo's tail look like? It's certainly not described as a cedar tree. God would not describe a hippo's tail or an elephant's tail as a cedar tree. And so what a person would say, what a creationist would say, is that this animal existed at the same time as Job, and this animal would be considered the Bronchiosaurus, which is that huge animal, the massive one. It's a behemoth, right? And it has a tail, that of a cedar tree. It's things huge, it's massive. And then it continues on. He says that he drinketh up a whole river. You're talking about some massive animal. You're not talking about an animal. So continuing on in my dream, I went to talk about how just the Big Bang, and if you believe in the Big Bang, then you have to, or if you don't believe in the Big Bang, then you're not believing in science, basically. But it's nothing more than theory, because in science you have to believe, what science is the ability to do the scientific method, right? Which is you observe something, you make a hypothesis, you test it, and then you reproduce what it was that you observed, okay? So Big Bang, when have we ever seen something be created from nothing? How would you test that? How would you reproduce making nothing from something? Something from nothing. And so it literally is unscientific in and of itself, using its own definition, and yet we're taught to believe that if you don't believe this theory, then you are dumb or something. I don't know. And so it just reminds me of Romans 1:18. It says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifested in them. God hath shown it to him. For the invisible things of him, being God, from creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood that things that are made, even his external power and his Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Meaning that God has shown them that everybody is without excuse on whether or not they believe that God exists, because it's clearly seen from creation of time. You can go outside, you can look at the trees, you can hear the wind, you can hear the birds chirping, and there is nothing, like God is clearly showing that his existence is real here. It says, because of that, then because they knew God and did not glorify him as God, and neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools. And so, in just further on the Big Bang, it's just so silly to me, because it was like, if I came to y'all and I described a time where I made a small bomb, and I set off the bomb in my backyard, and next to the bomb was a table with a deck of cards just strewn about on it, right? And I said, I set off that bomb, and it blew the cards up in the air, and they flew up in the air, and they came back down, and they landed in a perfect stack, perfectly in order. You know what I mean? Like, from this explosion came order. And it's like, well, no. Like, how many people would believe that story? That's just a stupid story, you know? There's no chance that an explosion can cause order. Explosions don't cause order. Explosions cause chaos. So to say that an explosion caused order without God is just silly, and not to mention the fact that in my illustration, it still falls short of what they're really saying, because in my illustration, there's already a table with cards on it, but they're saying that this explosion caused existence. It caused matter to exist. And so it just makes no sense. And it's unscientific on so many different levels. So, in fact, what actually ends up happening is a lot of astrophysicists see the order and see the magnitude of everything, and they cannot get behind the fact that there is no God. They have to believe that there is God. So most every astrophysicist is actually, at minimum, a deist, if not a Christian, because what a deist means is that they know that there is a God, but they might not know the real God. But they can't look at it in the face and say, there is no God. So if we have to admit that God created the world, then how do we know which God is the real one? And so from that, we have to turn to Jesus, right? We can't ignore him or pretend that he did not exist. If you say Jesus never existed, then you're making a mockery of yourself every time you write down a date, because that stands for the number of days, months, and years since a divide in time, and that divide in time was Jesus' birth. So for you to sit there and say that Jesus didn't exist is just foolish in and of itself as well. Not to mention the fact that there are many other sources outside the Bible that reference Jesus, from other valid historians of the time to Jewish rabbis saying that they were annoyed with Jesus because he was leading other of their Jewish members astray. So to say that you don't believe that Jesus existed would be just not accepting history, period. So if you don't accept history, then I can't work with that. But if you believe in history, then we can roll with that. So okay, so the dude existed. What's the big deal? Jesus is a dividing person because he claimed that he was God's son and the Jewish Messiah. And because of that, then you have to deal with that. You either have to decide that the dude was crazy, or he was who he says he was. And so for you to say that he's crazy, then we need to really start looking into what did he do, what did he say, and how did he act, how did he live. And so 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 there are more than 300 prophecies about Jesus from the Old Testament in the New Testament. And there was a mathematician named Peter Stoner who picked 8 of these just kind of randomly, I'll tell you about them in a second, to see what are the statistics of somebody being able to be born to show whether or not it's statistically possible for a guy to fulfill all these prophecies. So he picks 8, and he picks 8. The reason why he picked them is because they're just like easy ones that you can get the numbers on. Like he was born in Bethlehem, so you can come up with a number of what's the percent of the population who was born in Bethlehem, what's the percent of the population who was called out of Egypt. So he said who's been lived in Egypt for 2 or more years has been moved out. And he said another one was like how many people lived their whole life, lived to the age of 30 without breaking a bone. And so what's the percent chance of that happen? So he keeps going through all these different ones, and then he comes down to, with just these 8, then the chance of these 8 all being fulfilled in one person is the chance of 1 in 1 quintillion, which 1 in 1 quintillion is, what is that number? Nobody knows what that means. So just to put that in perspective, you are 300,000 times more likely to win the lottery. To put that in perspective again, if you were to, this illustration, and I said this in the dream, and I can't believe that I remember it, but you write your name on the back of a coin, of a silver dollar, and then 1 quintillion coins, you throw it in a pile and shake it up, and you disperse all of those coins all over the state of Texas. It would cover the state of Texas in 2 feet of silver dollars. And then you're to jump out of an airplane or a helicopter or whatever, and you land, and you reach down a foot or whatever deep, and you pick up 1 coin, and that coin is the coin that you wrote your name on. So that's the statistics that we're talking about. And this is to fulfill 8 of these prophecies. And there's 300 of them. So more than 300 of them. So it's impossible. Like, it couldn't be done. It's statistically impossible to be able to fulfill all of these at the same time without the hand of God. So he is God's son, so he was predicted that way. But is he really who he says he is? There's a guy named Lee Strobel who went to Yale Law School, and he went down that path. Is he real? Is he who he says he is? And did he really resurrect from the dead? Because that was one of the things that he did. He told everybody, I'm going to die. I'm going to be buried 3 days, and I'm going to raise again 3 days later. And so if you can debunk that one, then the whole Christian faith would shatter. But the fact is that the more you dig into that issue, the more you're going to find more evidence that it exists. So, and that's actually what this guy did. His name is Lee Strobel, and he was an atheist. His wife was an atheist. She got saved, and he sought to disprove Christianity to save her from her madness. And so whenever he did that, then he devoted 2 years of his life. He worked for the Chicago Tribune. He was the dude who did the Pinto scandal from Ford. He was the guy who exposed that. I don't know if any of y'all remember that. But anyway, so he went down to figure out exactly, what did happen to Jesus. And so he worked every angle of it. He said, maybe Jesus wasn't actually dead. Maybe Jesus, all the 500 people who saw Jesus after Jesus was resurrected were lying. Maybe there were, maybe he wasn't actually buried, or, maybe, or all these different options. He came up with everything, and after 2 years of evidence gathering, he stacked the evidence, and he didn't ever want to believe it because he was an atheist himself. And he finally broke down, and he said he had to face reality that the evidence was just so overwhelming that you can't believe that Jesus wasn't who he said he was, and you can't believe that he rose from the dead. He wrote a book called Case for Christ. If you ever want to read that book, it's a great read. So the God of the universe, the creator of heaven, sent his only son to us. And he said, and he is who he says he is. Then what does he have to say? So this is my third point. He says that he loves you. He says he wants to be with you, that he's chosen you, but he allows you to not choose him. It says, I said, we all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And the wages of sin is death, damnation, an eternal burning in a fiery place called hell. But through Jesus' death and resurrection, he provided atonement for our sins and provided a way for us to get to God. He said, I am the way, the truth, and life. No one gets to the Father except through me. He reached the hand out to us to choose to either accept or deny. To anyone who admits they are a sinner, believes in their heart that Jesus is Lord and confesses it with their mouth, they will be saved. Jesus talks about how everyone lives eternally, but those who call on the Lord will be saved. In Revelation, it talks about how there's at the end of age, Satan and demons and all the unsaved will rise up and gang up against Jesus. And but God, Jesus, and an army of angels fight against them, and they defeat them. And then judgment comes. The judgment comes, and all who do not have their name written in the Lamb's book of life will go to hell. Is your name in that book? Where are you going to go if you die tonight? Jesus in Revelation says, I stand at the door and knock. And whoever will let me in, I will enter. Is he knocking on your door now? Then are you listening? Rise with me for a minute. Miss Benita, do you mind coming and sing a song for us? If God has spoken to you this evening, then please come down. Learn more about Jesus. Yeah, I'm not, I would have been surprised if I would have seen an altar full on preaching against atheism inside of a church house too, on a Sunday night, you know. But this is what I felt like the Lord was laying on my heart to do. And so, you know, your hands are bound to it. You got to do what you're called to do. That said, it was convicting to me writing this message because it made me realize how many other people there are out there that are in a situation where they may be in need, where they need to hear the word, and I don't have a prepared word for them. So if an atheist came to me 3 months ago and said, why do you believe in God? I wouldn't have been able to articulate that. You know what I mean? But writing it down, getting it prepared, having a word ready really convicted me. And I was thinking about 2 Timothy 2:24 through 26. That's my brother Malcolm's life verse. It says, a servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle to all men, apt to teach, patient, meekness, and instructing those who oppose themselves. And he says it's a servant of the Lord that's to teach. You know, it's not just pastors, it's not just preachers. So my challenge to all the saved in here is, are you ready to present to somebody who is in need? There's people starving out there for word, and they don't have an opportunity to get it, but you're the opportunity. They're not going to come in here and hear Brother Malcolm preach because y'all are the people. And so are you ready? I'm convicted to go write a rebuttal to atheism, a rebuttal to Islam, you know, a rebuttal to Mormonism and different other things, because there's other opportunities out there, other people in different stages of life that we need to be ready. We need to know the word, and we need to be able to rebuttal and fight for Christ. So That's all that I have. I will say this also, if you want to, as we're closing, the lcr.org/Jasper Texas, Jasper TX that's the Creation Museum website Institute of Creation Research is coming to Hillcrest next weekend. Friday is already full. Saturday, it sounds like it's still open, but it's free. And if you want to know more about the science behind creation, go, because it's important. And it was life-changing to me whenever I went to go hear about it myself, because I was taught and believed in evolution and all those different things that I don't believe in anymore. And I don't believe that the science backs it. So, yeah, go sign up for that, lcr.org/JasperTX. There's one flyer outside, so take a picture of it and then hand it to somebody else. But outside of that, that's all I've got. Does anybody have any announcements or anything else before we go?